Hello everybody, I am an old guy gaming, and I am going to start a new, I'm going to call it a mini series, because it's probably not going to be a lot of videos, at least I don't think it will be. But what I thought I would do is I'm going to do an actual getting started in Empyrion tutorial series here, or mini series here. I'm going to do this for a couple of reasons. One, I've had people on my Discord and in the comments, you know, ask about tutorials, ask me to do tutorials, or ask if there are any good tutorials available more recently. And I got, I said, you know, I don't know, because of course I myself, you know, wouldn't watch a tutorial on this game, because, you know, I'm an experienced player on it. So I went ahead and did a little bit of a search on Google, and I didn't really find a whole lot available. Particularly, I didn't see anything at all available for 12.3. Spange did a sort of kind of tutorial on like the Arid Planet about 2 months ago on 12. On experimental, you know, 12.1 I think it was. But all that to say, I didn't. There's not really a whole lot out there, and you know, probably several people are going to want to start playing Empyrion, especially as we're getting ready for it to come out into its first beta release. And on a quick side note on that, I don't know how much the game's going to change when the beta release comes out. My guess is that most of the things that we'll cover here in this tutorial will carry over to the beta, because I think most of the changes that are going to come with the beta are going to be more you know, visual, graphical types of changes, and probably not a whole lot of changes to the actual base mechanics of the game, which is really what we're going to mostly focus on. I could be completely wrong about that, so don't quote me, you know, when the beta comes out on August 5th. You know, assuming that it stays on schedule, but that's kind of my guess. So yeah, we're going to do this now. A couple things about me. I've been playing this game almost as long as it's been out. It's been out for about 6 years now, and I played it right when it first came out. And then it kind of took about a year and a half off from it. And then when they came out with Alpha 6 or 7, I think it was, I got back into it, and I've been playing it pretty much ever since. And now we're, you know, on Alpha 12. So I am by no means an expert in this game in terms of knowing everything. I don't know everything about this game. There's still things that I'm learning myself that, you know, the viewers on the YouTube channel remind me of, or teach me that I didn't know. But on the other side of that coin, I've been playing the game long enough to where I certainly, you know enough about it to help new players out, you know, with the basics of the game and getting started. And I kind of dabble in most aspects of the game. You know, there's the survival aspect of the game. There is the building aspect of the game. There's, you know, the multiplayer aspect. There's the PvP aspect, and that's the one area I really don't do a whole lot of in this game, actually. So, you know, that kind of is an important thing for you to know. This is not a PvP tutorial at all. This is a PvE survival tutorial. So all that to say, you know, I feel like I'm definitely qualified to do a basic tutorial and, you know, teach new players how to do the game. Now, if you are an experienced player and you're watching this, and if I get something wrong, you know, feel free to you know, make that correction in the comments. I just ask two things of you. First of all, make sure that your response is fact, okay? Not your opinion versus my opinion necessarily, but that it's your information is factual and is actually true, and that's actually the way it is. And, you know, secondly, keep in mind what the purpose of this series is. It's to teach new players to play the game. So we don't want to, you know, have a lot of conflicting information in the comments that might confuse people, okay? So that being said, though, like I said, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything there is to know about this game. I'm still learning a lot of things myself, so I might not get everything correct, but that's okay. We should get enough information correct to make this tutorial worthwhile. All right, that was a big long preamble. Let's go ahead and jump in now. What we're going to do is we're going to start a single player game, and you have 4 different modes. You have survival, which is what we are going to do, scenario, creative, and freedom. Survival is what you probably would call the main way to play the game, because this is, after all, a survival game. It's a space survival game. So it has the typical types of components that you would expect, or mechanics rather, that you would expect in most survival games today. So, you know, you've got food, water, first aid that you got to manage, temperature you have to manage, durability on tools, There's a tech tree, and you level up and all those kinds of things. So that's what survival's about, and that's what we're going to learn, because again, it's pretty much the main way to play the game. Scenario is basically custom made survival games. And so you can go to the Steam Workshop and you can find all kinds of different scenarios that you can download and then play the game, in a reimagined way. One of the most popular scenarios that are out there that is out there right now is called Project Eden. And I actually have played that scenario. In fact, I spent the entire Alpha 11 era of this game playing Project Eden, nothing but Project Eden. And there's some other good ones out there too, but we're not going to cover that in this tutorial. We're going to cover the basic vanilla game for, again, those of you who are starting out and trying to learn the game. Creative is what you would imagine it is. It's basically sandbox mode. You have infinite stats, infinite material, there's no restrictions, and you basically, creative mode is used to build. So most people, myself included, will do most of the building in creative mode. And then what you can do is you can save whatever it is that you build, whether that be a base or a hover vessel or a spaceship, that sort of thing. You can save it as a blueprint, and then you can spawn it into your survival game, but not for free unless you're cheating. You still have to pay the materials into what's called the factory to actually bring that device in. And we'll cover that, as we get into the game. And then the last mode is freedom mode. It says it's like survival, but with unlimited health resources and no hunger management. So, pretty much explains what it does. And I've never actually played freedom myself, but, some people I'm sure have, but it's just not something that I normally would do because, I enjoy all those, the struggle in a survival game. There's a sense of satisfaction when you finally get to that point where, you don't have to worry about food anymore, or you don't have to worry about temperature anymore, or you don't have to worry about oxygen anymore. All those sorts of things that are important in this particular game. Okay, so enough said about that. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, when you start a single player game, you have a few options that you need to be aware of. So the first thing is the game name. The game name doesn't really matter as far as the game itself goes. That's really just for you to name the game, whatever you want to name it. So you just click up there, and we're going to just call this OG's 12.3 tutorial. Okay. Where this is somewhat significant, though, is this is the name that it will use to name the folders that it'll save in the game itself. And you might need to know that if you're going to do like manual backups and that sort of thing, which is not a bad idea, by the way. The seed, of course, as you can imagine, will determine how the procedural generation will work. Usually when I do a game, particularly like a Let's Play, I use my birth date, which is 1967. But of course, you can set it to whatever you want. And, that seed then dictates, of course, how the actual procedural generation will build the world. We have difficulty settings, so let's look at those next. So difficulty settings are basically, you've got easy, medium, hard, and then custom. And then this will change to custom if you change anything at all about the settings. I usually play on the hard settings just because I like the extra challenge when I do my Let's Plays. But for this particular tutorial, we're just going to keep everything on medium, which is the default. Let's talk really quickly about what all this means. Start equipment. Basically, the game will give you certain types of equipment that you're going to need in the beginning, and if it's on medium difficulty, they give you a decent amount. They don't give you everything you need, of course, but they give you more than they would if you were starting like in hard mode. Equipment on respawn. Basically, this is the setting that allows you to choose what do you want to keep if you died. Your toolbar, your whole backpack, nothing, those sorts of settings. So toolbar items only is the default setting. We'll keep that on that setting. Player progression, basically how quickly do you level, how much XP do you get, that sort of thing. Degradation speed, this is basically your durability. So how quickly does your weapons and your tools and your armor and that sort of thing wear down. Life stats, food consumption, oxygen consumption, and temperature radiation impact. All of those are fairly self-explanatory. They are very important settings, though, because they can have a huge impact on your survivability. So if you play on hard, food consumption, all of this is set to high, which means you're going to run out of food more quickly. You're going to run out of oxygen more quickly, and therefore you need to produce it faster and make sure you have enough to survive. Temperature and radiation, depending upon where you're at in the game and what planet you're on, and if you're in space or not, those sorts of things can have a huge impact on the character. And so, how severe are those elements going to be on the player? That's what this setting is. Resources, amount of ore, how many do you have? or rather, how rich are the deposits. So, you know, you've got ore deposits like copper and iron and that sort of thing. And then how many are you going to have on a given play field? A play field, generally, by the way, is just kind of a general term for the area that you happen to be in. So a planet, for example, is a play field, and its orbit is a play field, and so forth. Okay? Auto miner depletion. There is a device in this game that you can get a little later on. You're not going to get it right at the very beginning. It's kind of like a robotic miner. You can put it over an ore deposit, and it'll start automatically extracting the ore for you. And so if this is set to true, it means that once that ore deposit is completely exhausted, then it's gone, right? If you turn this to false, then that means that you have an infinite supply of ore, and the auto miner will just keep mining that ore forever and ever and ever. I never set that to false because for me, I think that's cheating. It is. I'm not saying it's cheating for other people that use it. If you want to use it, God bless you, more power to you. But I myself don't use that. And of course, the default setting is true. Enemy difficulty basically explains, influences the overall difficulty when attacking enemies. So that's really more, in my experience, has to do with how many hit points they have more than anything. I haven't really noticed that the enemy is smarter, in terms of their AI. If you set this on harder, I think it really mostly just means that they're tougher. So the harder they are, the more hit points they have, therefore the harder they are to kill. And the harder they hit you too. Overall drone presence, planets will have enemy drones that will patrol like, mineral deposits and other points of interest. And so if you have this turned up to high, then you're going to see a lot of those drones around. And of course they are dangerous and they will attack you. Drone-based attacks, basically how often will an enemy, the Xerax is usually considered the main enemy in the game. However, we have new factions now too that could also be enemies, like pirates, for example, or the Creel, or even the Talon if you decide to make enemies of them. These are all different factions in the game. So this basically controls how frequently they will try and attack your base if you become hostile with them. So for example, with the Xerax, once you reach hostile with that faction, then they will start sending squads or troops to your base to try and take it down. And so, how often is that going to occur is what this affects. Construction. How quickly can your constructors, which are the devices that you use to craft things, make things, slow, normal, or fast. Blueprint and repair speed, same kind of idea. If you're going to have a blueprint that you're going to build in the factory, or if you're going to place your vessel over what's called a repair bay, it's a special block that can repair it. How quickly do you want that to occur? Blueprint spawn limit. This is really more of a multiplayer thing, but basically, it can also be a single player thing too. But basically, what this does is it forces you, if it's enabled, it forces you to have like a pad or a place, an area that's attached to your base that you have to spawn your item in on. In other words, you can't just go out in the middle of nowhere and spawn a new ship. Okay. I don't like that setting. I certainly understand it in a multiplayer situation, but for a single player game, it's literally just a pain in the ass, a royal pain in the ass. So and notice that it is off by default too, which means I can go out and spawn a vessel anywhere that I want to. Okay. Block limit for certain device. Basically, this is really, it applies to other things, but it especially applies to weapons. In other words, if this is enabled, you can't put 100 turrets on a single ship kind of idea. Again, more of a PvP and a multiplayer thing, but it also applies to single player too, because if you put 100 cannons on a small ship, you're overdoing it. And then the final two things, really important settings here. These are off by default, but we're going to turn them on because they are now an integral part of how you play this game. And if you don't turn these on, you're shortchanging yourself, guys. It took the community, myself included, a while to kind of warm up to these settings because they really changed the way we play the game. But once you get used to how they work and work with them, at least in my case, it just makes the game more satisfying, more immersive, and more rewarding, because now you have to take these things into consideration. So what are they? Well, mass and volume is pretty simple. It basically means that if this is turned on, then you have limits as to how heavy stuff is, mass, and how much you can put into your inventory, the volume of it. So it makes it more realistic. So that means I can't, if I have a hover vessel that's only capable of carrying, 1 ton of weight, I can't throw 10 tons into that hover vessel and use it if this is turned on, because that's more realistic. Now, if it's turned off, then I can't, right? I can put 10 tons of crap in my own player inventory and walk around with it without any penalty at all. But with this turned on, you do have to take those things into account. And here again, I really encourage you to turn these on and right from the get-go and just get used to using them, because they will make the gameplay more rewarding for you. CPU points, same idea. This is even newer than mass and volume, only being introduced in Alpha 11. I'll be honest with you, I hated this at first. I really did not like it, and a lot of other people didn't either. But I have, I've come to appreciate it now. Plus, they've made some better improvements on it in Alpha 12 anyway. What this basically means is that you have a certain number of what are called CPU points that are divided into tiers. So you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and up to tier 4. And so if you have, depending on which tier you're on, you have a set amount of CPU points that you can use when you are, building a base or a vessel. And if you exceed those points, then you start to have penalties like, less efficiency and failure on some components and that sort of thing. And so everything that you put, that you use or that you build in a base or a vessel, whether that be blocks or, constructors or weaponry that you put up, refrigerators, just everything really will cost a certain number of CPU points. And so the idea behind this is that, here again, you can't just build a base and put everything under the sun on it and go to town. You have to make sure that you can support the CPU. And then once you get to the point where you exceed the CPU points, then you have to upgrade to the next tier, which is fairly expensive to do. But here again, it's just one of those things that makes things a little bit more realistic and a little bit more rewarding. So I highly encourage you to turn those on and just get used to them right from the start, and you'll be glad that you did. Okay, so that pretty much covers all of the difficulty settings. So everything is on the default settings for us, except for the fact that we turned on mass and volume and CPU points. Let's click OK. Finally, planet size. You have the option of medium and large planet sizes. Large planets are more difficult to start off on by virtue of the fact that you have a much larger surface area that you have to travel across to find resources and to find POIs and the things that you need. On the plus side, you have a larger world to explore and a bigger sandbox to play in. So from that point of view, it's actually, it makes it nicer to have a large world. The default setting, however, is medium. We're going to go ahead and just use that for the tutorial. And it's really up to you when you're starting out as to what size planet that you want to use. But if you just want to start with the, the basics, then go with the medium planet. And then, it'll tell you down here some information about this particular planet. The planet difficulty, don't pay too much attention to that, because I have not found that to be real accurate. There's certain planets that it says are easy and actually are not easy. And, I've even seen it kind of the other way around with that too. Things you want to pay attention to are the gravity. So, 1G, of course, is equivalent to Earth's gravity. Anything above that is going to affect what you would expect it to affect. So how high you can jump, how quickly you get tired. Your ships are going to require more thrust in order to get off the planet if you have higher gravity. So it's pretty, it's pretty practical. And be really careful with this too, because there are some planets in the game that have very high gravity, like 4 or 5G. And if you go down onto that planet, if you go and enter its atmosphere and your ship is not capable of handling that gravity, you will be marooned on the planet. You will crash and you will not be able to get off. Bad day. So just really watch that, especially, like the lava planets in particular are the ones that can really have high gravity. This tells you the general range of temperature. That's important to pay attention to, particularly if you're going to be on an ice planet, or if you're going to be on a planet that's, that's like a lava planet where the heat could be an issue, or even the arid planet too, for that matter. Whether or not the planet has radiation, some planets will have radiation, and you really have to be careful of that, because that's one of the things that will affect your character. Atmosphere density. That can affect things like, you know, how far your guns can shoot and your, you know, drag on the ship and that sort of thing. And then concentration of O2. That number is whatever it is. It's really this that you want to look at. Can you breathe on this planet without, you know, without a helmet or not? Okay, really important to pay attention to that too. This tells you what kind of resources the planet has and whether or not the planet will spawn meteorites once the deposits have been exhausted. So you'll run into that when you get off the starter planet into some of your more difficult planets. What'll happen is if you mine all of the iron off of that planet, then the game will start sending meteorites to that planet of iron, and you can mine them. And it's actually, that's a good thing, because you can get a lot more ore, and it's a lot easier to mine a meteorite than it is a deposit. Okay, this kind of tells you what you start with, your equipment, whether or not you're going to have a tutorial, which we're not going to go through because I'm doing the tutorial, but I do encourage you to do that in your game. And just kind of gives you general information about, you know, what is on this planet. Okay, now, if you didn't want to start on the temperate planet, then you have a couple of other choices. We will start on the temperate planet, but I just want to show the other choices to you. So you also have what's called an arid planet. Now, this planet is, there's a couple of important things that you have to really be careful of if you do an arid planet start. The first is temperature. Look how hot it can get on this planet. Okay. The second is you can't breathe. So you have to, in addition to everything else, you know, your food and that sort of thing, you also have to then manage oxygen, and you have to manage temperature when you do an arid start. Now, on the plus side, when you start on the arid planet, the game gives you a suit of light armor. And that's important because the light armor is essentially your space suit, in a space suit, I'm sorry, in which, you know, you could breathe with the helmet. So underwater and on the planet, it has a light on it, and of course it gives you some physical protection, and it has the jetpack on it. So there's a huge advantage in starting on an arid planet because of the fact that the game gives you the armor. It does not give you that on the temperate planet. You have to work your way up to it. But the trade-off is, you know, you have the extra difficulty of managing the oxygen and the temperature. Okay. And don't underestimate this temperature, you guys, especially if you play this on the hardest settings later on, once you get more used to the game and you want to try a challenge. It can kill you. It really literally can kill you very quickly if you don't manage this, if you're not able to manage this. Okay, and then we also have the swamp planet. I am actually playing on the swamp planet right now in my current Let's Play. This planet is similar to the temperate planet. The main difference between this and the temperate planet, though, is that it's more dangerous in terms of creatures. And it really is. You know, it says don't go into the swamp at night. Well, they're not kidding about that. If you go into the swamp biome, there's different biomes on the planets, by the way. There's plains, there's swamps, there's mountains, that sort of thing. But if you go into the swamp or the marsh, you know, types of biomes on this planet, especially at nighttime, there is a lot of nasty critters that want to eat you for dinner. So that's probably the biggest difference between the swamp planet and the temperate planet in terms of its difficulty. It's just a little more dangerous for the creatures. Otherwise, you have a breathable atmosphere. The temperature's not too bad here. It can get a little hot or a little cold, but it's not anything like the arid planet. And there's a little bit of a restroom in gold on this planet too. So there's a little bit better resources here, but again, you're in a little bit more of a dangerous environment. I'm actually enjoying the swamp planet though. It's actually been fun so far. And then finally you have the snow planet. Oh my God. This is the most brutal start that you can do in the vanilla game. Now, remember we talked earlier about, scenarios. So, you know, there's different scenarios that can have you start on different planets that can also be very, very hard to start on. But in the vanilla game, which is all we're worried about, if you want the hardest start, this is the planet to do it. The temperature here is really cold, and if you don't manage that and get a handle on that right from the get-go, it's going to kill you. Very, very dangerous place to start on. And of course, you know, we're not going to do that for this tutorial. So let's go back to the temperate planet, Philzel. That's going to be the name of our temperate planet. And let's get started. Here we go. Okay, so when you start the game, you will crash down excuse me, on the planet in an escape pod. You have a little bit of control over where you steer it to, but you don't have a lot of time to steer it to a particular location. My advice is just pretty much just land more or less straight down where where it is, because it's going to put you in what's called the crash site biome, which is designed to help you out kind of in the very early game. So just go ahead and crash land more or less where you're coming down. Oh, by the way, if you press the V key for view, you can I heard something growling at me. Go into like a first-person mode and kind of look out the window. I'm sorry I didn't catch that on time, but it doesn't affect anything. It's just a visual thing. Okay, so when you first land, you're going to get this option called Starting the Journey, and it's kind of essentially it's the tutorial. And what we're not going to do, what I'm not going to do in this tutorial series is I'm not going to talk much about the story, because I want you guys to be able to discover that for yourself. But what this will do, if I click Let's Go, it's going to actually start me off on both the storyline of the game and also take me through a real basic tutorial to kind of help me get started. But of course, you guys have me for that, so we don't need to do the tutorial. So we're going to decline this, but for you, go ahead and do this when you play the game for the first time. Okay? And this is basically just telling me, hey, if I change my mind and I want to start this mission actually later on, I can do that from what's called my PDA, which of course we will look at. All right, so let's click OK to that. So here we are. We have crash landed. The very first thing after you, click the tutorial buttons is you want to open up your escape pod, and you got some supplies in here. So if you just click on this arrow here, it'll move everything into your inventory. So that's one way to do it. You can also hold down Shift and left click on anything, and that will move devices in between your inventories. And you can also move it from your inventory into a container too. It doesn't look like it'll let me put stuff in the escape pod, but anything that you can put stuff into, you can also Shift click to move it that way. Okay. And then we're just going to hit X or press Escape, and the escape pod, we're done with it. There's nothing else we can do with this escape pod at present. You can, one thing you can do, however, is if I hold down the Shift key and I press the Action key, which is F by default, notice it says you can only sleep at night. So, you can use the escape pod, excuse me, you can use the escape pod to actually to sleep overnight. And that has a couple of advantages. First of all, what it will do is you will instantly wake up the next morning, well, after a few seconds anyways. And anything that is time-based, so let's say that I have queued up some resources in my constructor, like maybe I mined up some iron ore and I want to turn all those into ingots. If I put that in my constructor, and let's say it takes, like say, 5 in-game hours for that to complete, and I'm not saying it does, I'm just giving you, as an example, then if I sleep overnight, you're going to sleep for, probably 6, 7, 8 hours or something like that. When you wake up in the morning, your iron ingots are done. So it's kind of cool from that standpoint too. But be careful though, because it's also you're also going to expend, food. And if you're in on an oxygen-based planet, or a planet that you need oxygen, you will also expend oxygen, because your body is still consuming those things even while you're sleeping. Okay, so there's another way that you can spend the night, and that's with a survival tent. So you have this survival tent, and you can set it down wherever you want to set your camp up, and you can do the same thing with it. You can basically spend the night, and this will also set a spawn point for you too, which is important. Okay, let's see, what are we going to do now? So you are on the planet, and the first thing that you want to start doing is you want to start gathering resources. Now, there is a lot of things that we're going to cover. I'm going to be pretty detailed in this tutorial, so just kind of keep that in mind. This is not a here's just 5 quick things you need to know, do this, this, and this, okay, now go play the game. That's not what this tutorial is about. I'm going to try and be pretty thorough with this tutorial, but it also means, as a result, things might get started a little bit slower. So if you want action, just go watch the Let's Play instead. Anyway, that all being said, let's actually, let's start by talking about our HUD. Okay, so in the upper right-hand corner, you can see our mini-map, okay? And the mini-map, shows you the immediate area, that you're that you're at and what your direction is and that sort of thing. Pretty self-explanatory. When you see those little red ring things around the mini-map, that's the map telling you, hey, there's something in that direction. Now, we can also get more information about that by using what's called our detector. So I'm going to take the detector in my inventory. And by the way, default keys to get in your inventory, just press the tab key. Okay. Actually, I might be the default tab key. I'm sorry, the default inventory key in this game. I may have changed that to tab. I can't remember. It's either tab or I, but for me it's tab. Okay. So you open up your inventory and you have this thing called the detector. Now you can put that down on your toolbar. And usually what I will do is I'll put a couple of things on my toolbar right from the start. So I'm going to usually put, you know, some medical supplies there. And you have a health pack, which restores a large amount of health. And then you have a bandage, which restores a smaller amount of health. So you should have, you know, at least one of these on your toolbar so you can quickly access it in case you get hurt later. No, let me rephrase that. When you get hurt later. Okay. You also have this thing called the survival tool. So I'm going to put that on my toolbar. And you have a portable heater cooler, which I'll put on my toolbar. I'm probably not going to need that a whole lot on this planet, but man, if we were on the snow planet, this is the thing that, you know, the very first thing you need is that to help save your life, right? Or if you were on the arid planet, if it's too hot, this is also a cooler. So really important for those planets. For this planet, not so much. That's not to say we might not need it a couple of times, but it's not hugely important to our survival. This is called an ore scanner. You don't actually equip that. You just keep it in your inventory. And what that will do is it'll help you find ore deposits when you're mining. The antibiotic ointment and the antitoxic ointment, these are basically like tier 1 medicines that you can use for various different, you know, debuffs or ailments that you can get in the game. And it tells you, you know, what it will help you with, like dermal burn, frostbite, necrosis, etc., etc. Water can be directly consumed for stamina. It'll lower your body temperature, so be very careful drinking water on the snow planet. On the other hand, it's going to be very useful to you to drink water on the arid planet. The game does not actually have a separate hydration stat, though. It just has the food stat, and the food stat assumes, you know, your food and your water together. Okay? And then you have a ration. That's like the best food in the game, so it gave me one of those, and that will restore pretty much almost all my food, 300 food. And a lot of health. But those are very valuable, and sometimes you'll find them in loot, and later on in the game you can actually make them yourself once you get a farm going and that sort of thing. Okay, so anyway, we were talking about the mini-map. To the left of the mini-map, it tells me basically, it says partly cloudy, so it tells me what the weather is. And weather can be a thing in this game. So, you know, if you could be like in a hailstorm, and if you're in a hailstorm, you're going to take damage, so you got to get out of it. Some planets will have acid rain. Some planets will have radiation storms. So weather is also a thing. You got to pay attention to that. It tells me what kind of biome I'm in. So basically you'll see that I'm in the crash site right now. And then it also tells me how long in this particular position that I'm in, how long before sunset. So right now it says 6:37, 6:36. That's in-game time. So basically 6.5 hours-ish until the sun sets. So that gives me, you know, an idea of how, you know, where we're at in terms of the daytime, because night is a thing on the game. Things can change at night. You know, the nastier creatures can come out at night. It gets colder at night. And so, you know, for your overall survival, you have to take all that stuff into account. Then it tells me below the mini-map, you'll see the temperature. So you'll see a big 77 degrees Fahrenheit. The game actually uses Celsius by default, but you can change it to Fahrenheit, which I like to do because I live in the U.S. And then in the right next to that, you also see two smaller 77s on the right. The one up above, the top one is my body's temperature, my current body temperature, and then the one below it is the current environment's temperature. Okay, so that's important. Now, right now, the environment temperature and the main temperature are the same, one and the same. But if I got into, say, like a cockpit on a cold planet, the cockpit's going to warm me up, but the planet outside might be 50 below zero, right? And so, you know, that's where that comes into account. And then the upper one again is my body's temperature, which I can also see if I go into my inventory and I look down here at suit temperature right here. Okay, so 77 degrees. Now, why is that important? It's important because if you get too hot or you get too cold, you start, it starts affecting you. So if I get too cold, for example, it's going to dramatically start lowering my food. I mean, if you play this game on the hard settings, your food's going to lower so fast you can actually see the bar start moving down. It's that quick and very, very dangerous, because if you run out of food, you die. That's really what it amounts to. If my food gets all the way down to 0, I start taking health hits, and it'll kill me. So really important to mind those sorts of things. This down here, by the way, tells me my armor stats. And in this particular case, because I don't have any armor on, I'm just wearing normal clothes here. If the temperature drops below 59 degrees Fahrenheit, so if it drops to 58 or lower, then I'm going to start suffering those adverse effects that we just talked about. Okay, so really important to manage those sorts of things. And that's where the heater cooler could come in handy, if I start to get into those extreme temperatures. But do notice that when I hover over this, it says in the tooltip max temperature change. So that means that this device can only protect me up to 30 degrees beyond what my max limit happens to be, whether that's below or above, cold or hot. If the temperature is even more extreme than that, then even this is not going to help me. It's going to help, but I'm still going to start to suffer adverse effects again. So you have to really watch that. Here again, guys, not on this planet. We might get cold, a little cold at nighttime. We might get a little hot in the daytime if there's like a heat wave going on, in which case this can help us. But it's not really going to be that big of a deal on this temperate starter planet. It's a huge deal on the arid planet for heat, and on the ice planet for cold. So this is very important to mind those sorts of things. Okay, and then right below the main temperature, you'll see 0.0R. That's basically the radiation level. And the stats are the same thing again. So the upper little 00 is my body radiation currently, and the lower 00 is the environment's body radiation. Because here again, I could be in a radiation storm, and we could have, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 rads outside. And if I jump into my ship's cockpit, then, there'll be 0. So basically, again, it's just telling me, the big numbers are telling me what is my current radiation, where I'm currently at, whether I'm inside of a cockpit. And then the lower right-hand corner, the smaller 00 says, what is it like outside? Okay. Body radiation is very important, because if your body radiation gets up to 1, so it'll start incrementing, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and slowly go up like that. If it gets all the way up to 1, then again, you're going to start having problems. You get sick, radiation sickness, and it's going to have all kinds of adverse effects on you, like your health going down and that sort of thing. Not good. Not good at all. So you have to watch those things. All right, so that takes care of everything in the upper right-hand corner. In the upper left-hand corner, it basically just tells me what the version of the game is. So if you want to know what version you're on, you can look at that and it'll tell you. Down in the lower left-hand corner, we have several icons down here. So basically, this first icon here is your jetpack. So I can't show you that right now because I don't have a suit. But once we get a suit, then I can turn the jetpack on by pressing the J key by default, and then this will light up telling me that my jetpack is active. When you're in gravity or on a planet, sometimes you want the jetpack on so you can move faster and jump up high places, or make a fall less severe, that sort of thing. And then other times you want to turn it off and just walk around, because when your jetpack is on, sometimes it can actually be a little bit cumbersome to use. Now, when you're in space and you are not in any kind of a gravity well, you have to have the jetpack on or you won't be able to move at all. In fact, the game will actually cause you to fall in space if your jetpack's not on, which is a little silly because there's no gravity in space, but that's just the way that the game works. So you do want to keep that on when you're in space, and then you can move around and do spacewalking and that sort of thing. Okay, so what do we have next? We have the little helmet icon. So again, once I have a suit, then I can put my helmet on, and with my helmet on, then I can breathe, right? That's important if I want to go underwater, and of course, it's important if I want to go into space, and it's important if I want to go if I'm going to be on a planet that doesn't have breathable atmosphere, like the arid planet. And you can activate that by pressing the U key. It toggles off and on by default. O2. This is basically telling me that where I currently am, there is breathable oxygen. And you'll see that if you're on a breathable, on a planet with breathable atmosphere, or if you're on a ship that's pressurized and you can breathe on the ship, then you'll see that. This little doohickey here is telling me that I'm in gravity, right? So I have gravity and I can walk around. That will turn off, of course, if you're in space. This guy here will light up if you are too close to another structure or an ore deposit, and it won't let you build. So the game has a setting to where you excuse me, you have to be a certain distance away from another structure or from an ore deposit. You can't just build right next to it, and that's of course to prevent people from, you know, hogging up the resources or you know, spamming foundation spamming, that sort of thing. PvP, that basically tells me if I am in a PvP area. So some playfields are PvE only, which basically means that other players can't hurt you, shoot you or your ship. And then some playfields are PvP, in which case, you know, then they can shoot you or you can shoot them. So that'll light up if you're, you know, if you're in a PvP area. This last little icon, basically, when that lights up, that means I'm within range of a wireless transmitter, or a material transmitter as the game calls it. So basically the idea behind that is if you're in range of one of these, you can transfer objects, items from your inventory to a controller that's somewhere else within the range of the wireless transfer. Okay, so the idea is apparently it breaks it down to the molecular level, transfers it over, and then rebuilds it back into the container. That's the idea. It's actually very useful, though. And this was something that was introduced when they also introduced weight and volume, which I think was back in Alpha 9 or 10. This is going to come in really handy later on when we start to have to move high volume or high mass items that we couldn't normally carry ourselves. Then you have your health indicator, your food indicator. Remember, this is the combined food and water, your stamina, and your oxygen. So pretty self-explanatory there. Of course, we have our toolbar down along the bottom. And then there's a couple of buttons here to be aware of. This button means I'm looking at my player's own toolbar. If I was connected to another container using the wireless, I can't right now because I'm not in a wireless area, but if I was in a wireless area in a range, then I can switch to this connected toolbar button, and then that will give me a toolbar that allows me to access items that are in that container rather than what is in my own inventory. Okay, so that's what that is for. Everything up here is pretty much self-explanatory on the stats tab. This is just another way to see your health, food, stamina, just like you can see down here. We already talked about body temperature and suit radiation. This is your level and your percentage on your way to the next level. How many points you have to get to that next level. How many points you have for the tech tree, which we'll look at in a little bit. And then what your current monetary balance is, what your credits are. And we'll talk about that stuff later. And we also talked a little bit about your armor stats too down here. Okay, so we have gone over time. I like to try and keep my videos about 30 minutes long or so. So we're going to go ahead and quit right here, and then we're going to just pick up right at the same exact spot in the next episode and continue learning about this game. So we'll talk about the survival constructor. I'm going to go through all of these buttons up at the top of the screen and what they mean and what you do with them and that sort of thing. And then once we've kind of, familiarized ourselves with the interface, then we're going to start doing some things and start surviving and get some action going. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, it's very detailed, but I want it to be. I intend for it to be. So, this isn't going to be a huge action series. It's really here to teach you about how to play this game and take full advantage of this awesome space survival game. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. If you have, I really appreciate it. It doesn't take any effort. It doesn't cost anything to do those things. So I greatly appreciate it if you guys could do that. And also, if you didn't like this video, consider leaving me a constructive comment and help me to improve. And remember what I said to you more experienced players. If you think I got something wrong, feel free, to make that correction in the comments, but make sure that you are being factual and that you're not simply just, that it's not simply just a difference of opinion, because I just don't want to confuse the new viewers who are trying to learn the game. That's it, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.